September, another record-smashing month for Canada's largest housing market. New data showing home sales in the Greater Toronto area surging 42% year over year last month. I want to get some more perspective from on the ground. John Pasalis, president at Realosophy Realty, joining us now. John, always nice to see you. Give us a sense on how busy you have been. These numbers would suggest that if you're in the real estate game, it's been a pretty active time.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely incredibly busy in the real estate space. I can't entirely explain all of it, but it is what it is. I mean, a lot of strong demand. But I mean, one thing I think is worth noting is that we need to kind of take some caution when we're looking at these high-level numbers. I mean, we see sales surging, but there's really a lot of different things going on in the housing market. Low-rise is busy. Condos, very different story, a much slower market, in particular in the city of Toronto right now.
Why don't you explain why that is, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are going on. I mean, the low-rise house demand is, again, a lot of this is driven by partly just by this desire for people to kind of move out of condominiums into the suburbs, have more yard space. So that's just created a bit of an exodus from downtown. We're seeing a surge in rental inventory. Rental inventory is up about 250% compared to last year. Again, part of this is just recessionary. You know, when people lose jobs downtown, they move back home with mom and dad. When they can work from home, there's no real need to be spending $2,000 a month on a rental. So again, this is pushing up the supply of condo rentals, and it's pushing up the supply of condos for sale because demand quite isn't as strong in that segment. So right now, condo active listings are up 100% compared to last year. So it's a much more sluggish market than the low-rise home market.
We had a conversation earlier on with Jason Mercer from the Real Estate Board, just breaking down some of the numbers, and he came back to that supply-demand equation, in particular with detached homes. Walk us through what the process is like. You know, when I think about the red-hot housing market in an area like Toronto a few years ago that we talked about, you know, you had a lot of hubris. You had, as a seller, the opportunity to make the buyers sweat if they didn't get an offer on the table really quickly. What's happening with transactions, would you say, right now? What's the process like?
You know, it's interesting. So the market has, I mean, cooled down a little bit over the past few months. And again, part of that is just that we're seeing more inventory. So the downtown condo market, interestingly enough, usually the hottest market is probably, I'd say, among the cooler markets when we're looking at sort of low-rise homes. Sort of the tightest markets and the most competitive are really these outer suburbs. Those are the markets where supply is really tight, demand's really strong, tons of activity. Low-rise homes, downtown Toronto, still busy, but not quite as competitive as it was even 2 months ago.
And John, are you noticing a sweet spot? You know, and quite frankly, this is just anecdotal when I talk to people on BNN Bloomberg or people who are talking about housing, because you know it becomes a popular subject with people, that the higher you get in pricing, that's where things get a little more tricky given the environment right now. Almost like there is a sweet spot of where the demand is tied to what the actual price or how high you can go as a potential buyer right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, we are seeing that the more affordable homes are certainly the most competitive. You know, but having said that, I mean, with rates the way they are, I think it has helped fuel some decent demand even in the higher end market. I mean, we're still, interestingly enough, seeing a lot of competition in homes in the $2+ million price range, which is generally considered the higher end in the city. You know, so there's still a decent amount of competition and interest. And again, I think part of that is just that money's so cheap. So for some people, it's just a lot easier to upsize now, you know, when you can borrow at 1.7%.
All right. What does your crystal ball tell you, John? Where do you think we go from here? I mean, certainly the story of immigration has been complicated by COVID-19. That has been one of the driving forces behind the population growth in cities like Toronto, and ultimately the housing story. The head of the CMHC not too long ago on BNN Bloomberg said, what happens to the jobs picture in this country 3, 4, 5 months from now, and how's that going to impact demand? So what does your gut tell you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly, of course, some risks in the economy. I mean, my feeling is I think the low-rise single-family home segment probably can manage those. I mean, the demand is still strong. The supply is still pretty tight. We don't have a lot of new construction in that space. So even if we see demand pull off or an increase in inventory, it's probably not going to lead to any downward pressure on prices. But the condo market, and in particular downtown, completely different story. I see rental listings continuing to increase because we're not going to have those international students back anytime soon. Immigration's not going to rebound anytime quickly. So we're going to see continued downward pressure on rents. And we're starting to see downward pressure on prices. It's not coming through in the average prices, but downtown's got 5 months of condo inventory, and when you have a lot of units that are very similar, I mean, one of the only ways to sort of stand out is to price less than what your neighbors are listing for, and we're starting to see that right now.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because obviously the headline can be misleading when it comes to that condo story. So that's well worth watching. John, always good to get your insight and analysis. Thanks very much. John Pasalis joining us with the latest on those housing monthly numbers that we've been talking a lot about this morning.